focus of his work has been the reintroduction of the osprey. And we love our ospreys here in Central Florida, and we're excited to learn how they've been working to get the population back healthy over in the UK. So I'm very excited to introduce Mike. Thank you for joining us so late at night on your end of the world. And everyone sit back and enjoy and type your questions in, and I'll be happy to answer at the end.
Right, well, thank you very much for inviting me to kind of close your last speakers and things like that. So I can say really good morning from my end. So it's just after midnight here over in the UK. So kind of I have been working for Anglian Water for the past 16 years as their Biodiversity Advisor. So I can't take all the credit for reintroducing ospreys back into England, but it's been a pleasure to kind of work alongside kind of people from the Leicester and Rutland Wildlife Trust who manage the part of the reservoir for me, and kind of also the Roy Dennis Foundation, who is the kind of the main lead of the project to help to reintroduce the bird. So I'm going to hopefully give you a little bit of story with it all. If I can move my slide on. So tonight what I'm going to do is tell you about where Rutland Water is, a bit about osprey conservation, kind of the ecology of ospreys. So that would be a similar kind of thing to the UK ospreys of what is very similar over in America. Some of the satellite tracking work that we've done, and kind of the social engagement. So this is the picture of the UK, and the bit in purple that I've marked out is the region of the Anglian Water covers. So we are a water and a water recycling company, so look after the sewage side of things. So this is what I would say is my patch of where I work and look after and manage for nature conservation over here. And this is Rutland Water. So it is one of the biggest reservoirs, land or man-made reservoirs in the UK. And it's meant to be one of the biggest in kind of Western Europe. So it was created back in the 1970s. And it is in size 15 square kilometres in size. And we have got around the outside of the reservoir with tracks for cycling and walking, that we've got 42 kilometres of cycle network around there. And on the western side of the reservoir is classed as the nature reserve. And I think my last count, we've got about 26 bird hides that the general public have got access to. So ospreys, there are kind of, it's debatable about, it says about that there's 3 subspecies, but there's actually kind of a 4th one as well. But the 4th one is a non-migratory one. So here over in the UK, the picture in the shot here is the one that covers Europe, Africa, and parts of Asia. And then you have got one that you find in North America that will go between South America and North America. And then you've also got one in the Caribbean. But the kind of the 4th one is the Australian one. And that really stays over in Australia and doesn't actually move or migrate anywhere. So it doesn't even migrate over to New Zealand, it just stays within Australia itself. So ospreys, they are a fish-eating bird. And so sometimes their other names that they go by are sea hawks or river hawks or a fish hawk. But over here in the UK, they're known as an osprey. So this is a really kind of fantastic shot of a photograph of the osprey coming in to collect the fish. And it, as you can see on this photograph, that they have got, like with their talons, they've got 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom. So they're what they say is their outer toe claws, they're reticulated, so they can swap between going facing forward or facing back. And it means that they can grab hold of fish a lot easier, compared to just thinking if you've got the 3 talons at the front and 1 talon at the back. It means that, like with that the fish would wriggle and get out of those talons. And they are the only raptor, apart from owls, that have that ability to move that claw from the front to the back. So should also say that they are, so with them kind of fishing, that they will fly, they can fly up to, what is it, it's about 131 feet above the water and still have the sight of fish. And when they come in to go and get the fish, that they've got the ability to, as they just hit the water, they've got the ability to close their nostrils to stop any water from going down the beak and into their body. And they can dive down for up to kind of between 6 and 10 feet of depth of water. So this is part of Rutland Water, on the western side of the reservoir. Actually, well, yeah, I'll come back into the incubation in a bit, but yeah, so this is the kind of the western side of Rutland Water. So the whole reason why we decided that we would introduce birds back into Britain, or back into England, should I say, that they had been kind of absent for a few hundred years. They were kind of persecuted for eating fish, and there was egg collectors and bits like that. But over the years, probably in the kind of the mid-90s, we were having ospreys coming over the reservoir and stopping and fishing. And then in 1996, we decided that we would translocate ospreys down from Scotland down to England. So over those years, we brought down 64 juvenile birds that were about 6 weeks old, and this is one of their pens here. And the idea is that you can see in the back you've got some little holes, and that would be where we would post the fish through, because what you don't really want is these birds to actually get used to seeing people and associating people with food. So we used to put the food through those holes, and at that 6 week period that they're able to kind of feed for themselves. So that's what we had to do. So we brought them all down under license. So from 96 to 2001, we introduced those birds back to England. And this is the view that they have over from those pens into the reservoir. And the idea at that kind of 6 week period, that what you want is that when these birds actually fly back or go down to West Africa, you want these ospreys to remember that this here is home, because what you don't want them doing is actually flying all the way back to Scotland, where they originally came from. So the idea is of bringing them down at about 6 weeks old is that you want this to be imprinting on their mind here. So it's not plain sailing for the birds. So once they've kind of started to fly and fledge, then so this will be kind of around the September time, early September, that they then start making their maiden voyage for the first time, and they do it individually. And this here is the Moroccan mountain range. So once you've got over kind of Europe through like France and Spain, you then hit the Moroccan mountains. So if you don't think that this is kind of bad enough, they are then met with the Sahara Desert, which is one of the driest arid places within Africa. So they have this to deal with. So they not only have to deal with kind of with no water, no food, but you've also got the sandstorms as well. So they have to fly around that, or sometimes they even ground themselves for a day or so because of the weather. And we'll talk a little bit more about tracking later on, but this was a a tracking device. We put a tracking device on a juvenile bird in 2000, and this is the route that you can see that it took going over Africa, where it then ended up in Senegal, where it overwintered. So this is the kind of flight that they will take. So, but I think the quickest that we've had a bird actually leave Senegal and make it back to Rutland Water is about 6 weeks, not 6 weeks, about 12 days. They've done that whole flight in about 12 days. I know it's unusual with this kind of flight, but they normally would take more of a coastal route. So I'll show you a picture of that later on. But yeah, so if you're going from Senegal virtually in a straight line up through into Morocco, Spain and France, that is roughly around 4,000 miles. Haven't worked that out in kilometers for you, so I do apologize. So yeah, so this is just trying to think what. So yeah, so what kind of happens is that so yeah. So once the birds are now thinking about making their way back to the UK, that when they've done all that journey and they make it back, the idea is that they will feed up. So this is one of our males that was translocated in 1997. And you can see here he's got a ring on it that is known as O3. So yeah, so when we report on these birds that he was known locally as O3 of 97. So we never really named any of the birds on site. We just kind of kept them easy for. It's just known as the Darvik ring, the actual O3 bit. So this was one of the males, and he has been responsible for a lot of the juvenile birds and the osprey population in England. So he first returned in 2000, and he bred for the first time in 2001, where they raised a chick for the first time, and this was the first time in 150 years that ospreys had bred back in England. So yeah, so once he's made it back, he then claims his nest, and ospreys over here are generally quite lazy, so we kind of put artificial nests up for them. If you are lucky, they may take over kind of other birds that are kind of like the corvids that are over here, like crows and jackdaws and rooks and bits like that, but they're generally quite lazy birds, so we have put nests up for them to actually take over. So he'll come back and he'll stake that claim of that nest, and he'll start to take out all that old grass, or the grass that you can see there starting to grow. He'll take all that out and then start to kind of reline it with sticks, all shapes and sizes. And then he'll be getting ready for a female to come back to him. So yeah, so sticks of all shapes and sizes. And how they get these is that basically they find kind of dead standing trees, and then they kind of come in at a height, and then as they fly down towards the tree, they just crash into it with their talons out to grab those branches and hope that that branch will actually snap, rather than actually flicking them out of the tree. But I feel like it's quite a clumsy way of actually collecting sticks, but that's how they do it. But yeah, so sticks come in of all shapes and sizes, and then hopefully they will pair up, and generally they pair for, I'd say they pair for life, which is generally what they do. The only time that they kind of split up from each other is if they failed to breed for a number of years. So if the female has not been able to kind of hatch any of the eggs, that they may decide that actually it may be the nesting location, and then they'll move elsewhere, and then they'll try again for another few more years. And if they're not successful after that, then they will actually kind of part their ways, and then they'll set up new, have new partners the kind of the following year. Then you've got the kind of the courtship. So this is them courting with each other. I don't know if these kind of things, I think it kind of happens out in America as well. But what will happen is that the male will be the one at the bottom, and then what he'll do is he'll lock his talons with her, and that they will fly kind of spiraling down, almost out of control a little bit. And then what he'll do is he'll spin himself out, he'll let go of the female, and this is one of the ways that he'll show her that he's actually a really good kind of flyer and things like that. So it's just kind of showing his ability about how he can fly around and bits like that. So what what he will then do next is, once he's done all that, he will then be presenting really big fish to the female, because what he's trying to do is kind of show her that he's actually a worthy male for her to actually breed with, and that if he's starting to bring in all these really big fish, then he must be a really good provider. And then once he's managed to kind of secure the female, then it doesn't really matter what kind of size fish he then brings in after that. That as long as the initial bit for the first few fish, that they're quite large fish, then she'll be quite happy. And this is where they will then take up their traditional roles, or their roles within the birding world. So the male will be the provider, and he will also be the one that protects the nest from any intruders. And the female will be the one that will be doing most of the incubation. She'll be making sure that those chicks are nicely fed, and making sure that nothing kind of lands on the nest like another osprey or a red kite or anything like that. So she will defend the actual nest cup itself, but the male will do the surrounding skies as well. So here we have this is our red kite over here. So you'll find that probably the male will be in a nearby tree, probably on its way to see this red kite off. Even though red kites are a carrion feeder, so they're not really seemed too much of a threat, but it's still something that sets the female off, and she'll stand up, and occasionally you'll see her putting her wings out to kind of defend the actual nest. And it doesn't stop the little birds as well. This is a little bird called a pied wagtail. I just flick back. So this bird, this little pied wagtail, was actually nesting within the nest platform itself. So yes, I think that at one point the osprey got a little bit close, and the pied wagtail decided that it needed to defend its own nest from the osprey. And because the population is still relatively stable and new within England, that for quite a number of years we used to be watching the nest all round the clock, and for a couple of sessions I used to go and do an all-nighter, and I would kind of stop in that van overnight and just be watching the nest. And we had like thermal image cameras or a telescope that we used to just watch the nest over the night, just to make sure that there was no one lurking about to steal any of the eggs. That sadly it still goes on over here. Can't understand myself why egg collecting goes on, because it's illegal over here, and you actually can't display the eggs or show them off. So yeah, so I don't really get that side of it. But touch wood that we've had no one actually deciding to do that on our site where we've got the birds. And we had a very good working relationship with the local police force. So all of our nests had an incident number. So if we ever saw somebody looking suspicious, or we saw a suspicious vehicle, we could actually ring the police up, give over a code that gave that nest location, and the police would respond to it and come out to investigate why that person was there, or why the vehicle was parked nearby where the nest site was. So, but luckily we never had to try that out. So this is a it's unusual to have 4 chicks in a nest, but we have done over in the past, but sadly the younger one generally dies, so we are kind of left with so yeah, so it is unusual. The best, well, the chance that you normally have is, or the occasion you normally have is about 2, but yeah, it all depends on the sometimes with the male. If the male is a really good kind of hunter, then he will the female will sometimes lay 3 eggs. So we have got a male on site, which is, he is very prolific with going out catching fish. So yeah, so she generally lays 3 eggs. And what I would say is that with the incubation, that they can incubate the eggs from anything between 35 and 45 days, and then it's usually around, after that, then they would probably be fledging around 10 weeks old. So this is what they look like at about 6 weeks old, and this is where we will go up and collect the birds out of the nest to start to ring them. And like I said, that with the male, this is the male coming in with a large stick. So yeah, so he will still carry on building the nest up. And on this occasion, this great big long branch that he brought in, that the female then came back and then turfed the stick out because it was far too big. And what he ended up doing was he just plonked it over the back of the chicks in that nest, and I don't think the female was too impressed, so she picked up the stick and turfed it back out of the nest. So yeah, so they'll carry on building the nest, or he will anyway, on that site. But on another nest site, the one that we've got on the actual reservoir itself, that male that we have there, he's very attentive to his female, which is unusual for ospreys, but he will sit on the nest while she's incubating. And if it's kind of raining or there's really strong winds, he will actually go and sit in front of her to kind of shield her from that weather condition. So normally ospreys, the male osprey will go and sit in a tree nearby and won't sit on the nest with the female while she's incubating. But with this male that we have, that's known as 33, because that's the colour of his leg ring. But yeah, so he will take more than his fair share of sitting on the eggs to incubate them. And when he feels it's his turn, that he'll come onto the nest and try and turf the female off because he wants his turn then. And if she's reluctant to doing that, he'll stick his head underneath her and try and lift her up. And if she's not giving up at that point, he'll grab hold of her wing and try and pull that to actually turf her off the nest. So he's quite adamant. So he's quite an unusual male, but that's why we will sometimes have 3 and maybe 4 chicks on that nest site, because he is very caring as a bird. So this is me in my kind of younger years when I had a bit more hair, of ringing one of the chicks. So this site here, we hire in what they call a cherry picker. Don't know what you call this kind of machine out in the States, but basically you've got some legs at the bottom that kind of splay out to get your balance, and then you've got a controller to go up to the nest itself to collect the chicks, and then you bring the chicks down where we will be ringing them, and we work out the kind of the sex of the birds, and you can do that via the weight. So even at 6 weeks old, that those chicks will have reached virtually their kind of adult weight. So a male chick, he will be coming in at just over 3 pounds in weight, whereas a female will be just over the 4 pounds, so 4.4 pounds in weight. And then also that you can have a look at the bill as well. It's slightly thicker and bigger on a female, whereas it's slightly thinner and on a male. So yeah, and they've also got so by that point they'll be developing, they'll be virtually fully developed, So they'll have a wingspan of about 6 foot. So yes, they're quite impressive. So when they're about 6 weeks old, they will sit in your lap like this quite happily, and you generally will keep the talons away from you, because you don't really want those talons actually grabbing hold of you. And if you are very unlucky, if they do, then you then have to carefully remove each talon from your hand or your clothing or wherever they've grabbed hold of. So you have to carefully do that. Otherwise, if you rip them out, then it's actually causing the bird obviously harm. But you're also thinking that that bird still needs those talons to actually grab hold of fish. So you're being very careful how you do it. And this is what the talons look like really close up. As you can see, they're like little needles. And then so this is how we do the banding. So we've got the plastic Darvik ring that you can see there, and there you're able to see those through telescopes or binoculars. So once we've done this to these birds, this is probably the last time we'll actually handle that bird. So you'll be able to see these rings from a pair of binoculars or a scope. And then we've also got a metal band that goes on the opposite leg, and that is more permanent than the actual plastic one, just in case the plastic one breaks off. But you've got a unique ID number to that one. And then, as you can see, just on the kind of the right hand side of it, you've got an address if you were going to be sending the information back if you found the bird. We did a few years ago we had a letter with the rings from a gentleman in South Africa, well, in West Africa, in the Gambia, who apologized for eating and shooting an osprey. He said that he hadn't eaten for a few days, and he saw an osprey that was grounded, and he decided to shoot it so that he could feed himself and his family. And then once he went and collected the bird, he realized that it was ringed, and he felt really bad by it. And he wrote a little letter, and he walked to the nearest kind of post office or the post department, and he walked for about 2 days there and back to actually put these rings in the post with a little letter apologizing that he'd shot one of these ospreys, but he needed to feed himself and his family. So it was quite an unusual letter to actually get through the post, of someone actually apologizing for shooting one of your birds. But yes, it was always a kind of a story that's really stuck in my mind with it. So whilst we do the ringing, we had another project with a chap on the right hand side. He was doing a research paper, and just to make sure that the birds were all still healthy and that we got a good genetic gene pool going, that they weren't interbreeding too much. So they were taking DNA swabbing. And the chap on the left hand side, a guy called Dr. Tim McCrill, he kind of started out his career as a volunteer for the Osprey project, and then he eventually got employed as a member of staff, and is now set up a charity called the Osprey Foundation, and that is to do with linking up kind of communities on the flyways. And he's actually got a project going with the Americas Osprey as well, so kind of linking up with schools here in the UK and Africa and the Americas. So once you've ringed one bird, you then kind of gently put it on the floor, and then you then start doing the next one. And then once you've finished doing all those birds, we then put them back up into the tree. And then we'll also, because you've got the male and female that have been busy flying around and making their presence known that they're not very happy with you, we then leave a couple of fish up there for them to just to help them, because they've just been kind of flying around trying to defend their territory and their chicks. But they won't really ever attack you, I say that. And we've got one male on site that is very, very aggressive. and nobody really likes to go and ring his chicks. So I thought it was a bit of a joke when I was actually there on a trip out ringing with the team, where they then got all these little straws out, and one had got a coloured end, and the idea was that whoever got the coloured end had to put on all the protective clothing, the hard hat and a towel around their neck, and to climb the ladder to go and collect the birds out of the nest. So nobody really liked doing it, and when they did do it, that you could see the male, he really meant kind of business about protecting his young, and he would be literally a couple of inches away from your head, like fully taloned out. And they said that you could feel the actual whoosh of him going by you. So thank goodness that health and safety my end doesn't allow me to climb ladders to go and collect these birds out of the nest, because I really wouldn't fancy kind of a 3 pound bird really meaning business to come and get you. So after about 10 weeks or so, the birds are now starting to find their wing muscles, and what they're doing here is that this is called helicoptering. So when you've got a bit of breeze, the idea is that the bird will sit head on into the breeze and then be flapping their wings and taking off and landing back up and down onto the nest. And it's a way of them actually kind of strengthening those wing muscles, because you've got to think that come the end of August over here, that they'll be then getting ready to migrate on their own. So at the beginning of August, this will be kind of happening, and they'll be flying off and looking around the reservoir and the surrounding area. This is always a bit of a moment where we almost hold your breath a little bit, because some of them can disappear for a couple of days and then they return. But it's always a bit of a kind of a heart-stopping moment when they take that first voyage, because you've been monitoring them for so long that people see them, especially some of the volunteers that we have on that help us out, that they see them just like their own birds. And when they disappear for 2 days, you think, oh crikey, that bird's now gone, it's died, or has it come to some kind of mishap. So but then you get a bit of a sigh of relief when you actually see that bird come back, and it then starts food begging and then gets fed by the parents. So what kind of happens roughly at the beginning of August, the female then flies off on her own. So she'll then leave the nest and leave the male to kind of carry on feeding the fish to the youngsters. So she'll be now off and making her journey back to kind of West Africa. And then towards the end of August, the male will be starting to limit the amount of fish that he drops off in the nest, because what he wants now is the youngsters to actually make their journey, so that he can then be not far behind to actually make his own, because they're trying to make their way back down to Africa. And if they don't kind of make that journey, or don't leave quick enough for him, he then starts to harass them to kind of gently encourage them, to make them know that it's actually their time to start making a move. And this is one of our nest sites here in one of the trees. So you can see the 3 youngsters at the top, and then the male and female down on the bottom. I think this is a beautiful photograph. It's just really kind of nicely silhouetted with the birds. So this is one of our nest sites on the reservoir. This is where we've got one of the webcams as well. So it's live at the moment, and you can watch it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So now we're coming into some of the tracking work that we do. This is an adult bird. It's quite tricky to be ringing adult birds because you have to catch them in a different way than kind of going up into the nest with the chicks. So it's quite a tricky way of catching them. But anyway, so this is how we put the tags on the back. It fits on like a little rucksack. And then the idea is, you can see in the middle, that's a little solar panel that keeps the tracker charged. And what that will enable us to do is to actually track their progress, and it can all be done by computer. So you just link up to the satellites and then download and connect to the actual satellite tag itself. And this is where I think it's really kind of interesting, and how you can get hold of this data, so that you can say whether you want the information every hour being recorded, or every 10 minutes, or every half a day, something like that. But we generally do it for like once a day, basically, because of the sheer amount of data that you get from it. Because not only do you get the GPS positioning, but you also get the altitude that the bird flies at, whether it's kind of flying at 100 feet or 200 feet above sea level, or you can get it where it's just flying a couple of feet above the sea level. So if it's really windy, then they'll be flying really low to the sea and to the ground and things like that. Whereas if it's on a calmer day, then they'll be using more of the thermals to actually save that energy. But we also can get air temperature and body temperature. We can get the speed of the bird that it's flying. So it's really, really amazing information, and it's quite vital as well in terms of the conservation, because you can then start to look at protecting flyways and bits like that. So with this bird here, 09, we stopped receiving a transmitter location. So as in the birding world that people are fascinated with birds, we put a message out in Morocco to see if anybody would actually go and find this tracking device to see what happened to the bird. So we had a phone call or a message from a guy and said, yes, I will go and do that. He was kind of an ex-RAF fighter pilot, and he decided that he would go and retrieve this tag for us. And this is the chap here. So all he had was just his t-shirt, shorts, and a pair of sandals, and he walked for kind of half a day up through the Moroccan mountains to actually go and retrieve this tag. And this is the kind of scenery and the terrain that he was actually walking up in kind of sandals. So yeah, so not even proper hiking boots. And this is the remains of the bird. And we worked out that it was probably eaten by a European eagle owl. So this is probably one of its only kind of predators. We always think that ospreys are the kind of the apex predator, but it's only kind of eagle owls that are bigger that will actually be able to take on an osprey. And we believe that it was kind of hankering down because of the weather, and there was probably some sandstorms that actually made it more vulnerable being on the ground. So yeah, but we got the tag and the data and things like that back from that chap. So we put another one out another year on the back of an osprey. So I haven't done the conversion rate between pounds and into dollars, but these tags cost around £3,000 per tag, and then you have then a monthly download fee of about £40. So I do apologise for not getting the cost converted for you, but yeah, so we pay about £40 a month for that tag, and these tags will can last kind of up to about 5 years before they will actually fall off the bird. And then this is some of the actual data that you start to get. And this is why I was saying it's quite interesting and quite important, because you can actually start to see. So the green line is 1 year's worth of flights. So it's an autumn and then followed by a spring. And then the blue line is the following year. So you can start to see there's various patterns, and that if you, I did have another shot, but I couldn't find that map. But I have got kind of 4 or 5 years worth of data, and this bird is flying exactly the same route as it did the first time it had that tag on the back of it. So what's believed is that they are kind of using almost landmarks as well as the magnetic fields. And what you do find is that when they get blown off course, that's what they'll do is try and head back to that line that they've been following before. And on some of the data things that we've had, you can actually see where they've been blown off course, and then they've either come east or west to get back onto that line before they've turned straight north or straight south again. And they're virtually back on that same flight line. And the other interesting bit is that with other bits of work that I've done with like cuckoos and nightingales, that they are taking virtually the similar kind of flight paths as the osprey. So it goes to show there's actually more to these flight lines than we're actually led to believe. And this is where this data comes in really handy, because not only I don't get involved in the politics side of things, because I'm only I work for a water company, so we're only regional based in the UK. But this information is used then by other organisations to look at protecting those flyways, those important flyways for these birds, not only these birds, but for other species of birds that will be taking this exact same flight. And then this is the other really kind of interesting bit, that when they get to their winter location, that they generally sit in that same tree or that same fence post, and then they will just go out to go fishing and then come straight back. So you can see this post, or where its location is where it will be sitting for the rest of that winter. So I should say that when with the juvenile birds, that they will spend about 3 years in West Africa before they actually make that journey back. So this is one of the ospreys right by the beach in the Gambia, and this is where we've had a team of volunteers actually go out to the Gambia, and we've seen him sitting on this same branch for 4 years. So he kind of claims this tree branch that's actually sticking up in the sand dunes. And this is the view that if you look one way going to the north, this is one view, but then if you turn 190 degrees, this is the next view. So this is one of the kind of the educational bits that the Osprey project has gone into, is kind of the outreach work. So as far as the local community here in the Gambia, all they're concerned is that ospreys are here all year round, and they see them having an impact on their fishing and their livelihoods. So they will actually be looking at trying to control ospreys, because as far as they're concerned, they don't see ospreys coming and going like we do in the UK. Because if you think that a juvenile bird will stay down in Africa for up to 3 years, that's all they see. They just see ospreys all year round. So we are working with local children to talk about osprey conservation, and we've been working with NASA. So we've now got kind of internet and satellite dishes into the schools, some of the schools around those locations, and we're actually connecting these children up here at this school with children in the UK to talk about their experiences with ospreys. And it's led on to kind of the Americas as well. So we have a thing called World Osprey Week in March, where we connect up with the children in Africa and the children in the UK and in the Americas to talk about ospreys, and so that they've got some kind of way of actually talking with each other and relating how they see ospreys and bits like that, and get an idea. And also that we've got a curriculum pack that is set up to look at osprey conservation. So it looks at like the maths and geography and biology and bits like that. So we see it as quite important for kind of osprey conservation. So not only is it kind of about that, but it's also about talking to people in the UK about the Osprey project. So it's all well and good putting a bird hide up and encouraging people to see it, but we've got a really good volunteer team on site. We've got about 150 volunteers that man the bird hide and man the visitor centre, and we have kind of a boat cruise where we can go and see or get close-ish to the nest without disturbing them. And then we've also got our web camera. So I'm just going to show you some pictures from our webcam that we've got up. So this is the male and female on the nest itself. So before they start laden it with sticks and bits of turf. And then you get some really good shots of the eggs. And this is where it really starts to come into its own. A couple of years ago, when we had one of the eggs hatch, it was worked out on the statistics on Google that we had, I think it was about 26,000 views on the webcam within a couple of hours. So it just goes to show kind of how powerful this information is and how interested people are at actually seeing these birds. And then I thought that I would just log on this morning to the webcam to see what was actually happening. So this was at about 3 o'clock this afternoon. So these are the 3 birds that you can see. And because it's quite hot here in the UK at the moment, we're getting up towards 30 degrees in heat, which is quite warm for our June. But yeah, so these are the 3 chicks here. And then we've got another camera that then now looks down into the actual nest cup itself, and you can see them from there. So yeah, so these have just been ringed as well at the moment, or banded. And getting closer to your home, that it hit our local papers earlier this year that there was a Scottish ringed bird that ended up being recorded in January in Barbados. So it's really unusual. It kind of hit all the media over here, and we believe that what happened was that it went onto a cargo ship that then sailed off to Barbados and was catching fish along the way, because this is one of the direct lines for freight going from Scotland to kind of Barbados and the islands around there. So yeah, so this is a Scottish female, and I think the interesting bit will now come when she wants to, in 3 years' time, decide to fly back. That will she actually fly back to Scotland, or will she actually fly up into North America, which will be really interesting if she does do that, because this is the first known kind of English osprey that has done this kind of flight. So, and it goes to show that by banding them is actually really important, because it then gave us this information about this one bird. So yeah, and I just want to kind of say thank you very much for letting me come and talk to you tonight, and I hope you found it interesting, and I kind of open the floor for any questions.
Thank you so much. This was such a complete, thorough presentation. So Susan's going to read some questions that have come up in the chat.
Okay. Whoops. The chat just moved. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to go to one, but the first one, okay, Leah lives near Lake Jessup and has groups of birds circling around each other, and was wondering what they're doing besides just having fun. I'm assuming these are ospreys, or are these other birds, Leah? We might need to.
Oh, I was talking all ospreys.
Welcome up. Ospreys. So have you seen that behavior, Mike?
Yeah, sometimes this will be, it can be juvenile birds. So juvenile birds that are what you'd say in your teenage years, they're almost in the birding bit kind of classed as delinquents, because what they'll do is that they come back, what would it be? They come back over here, they come back in about May, so kind of late on in the season. And what they do is they then kind of harass the male and female birds and try and take over other nests, and just be quite problematic for a lot of birds. So what they'll do is that they'll be kind of soaring around together as a group and just being kind of disruptive. But you could also find that it might be on a territorial boundary as well. So rather than them actually kind of attacking each other, that they will kind of dispute themselves by flying around. And also sometimes if you look closely enough, that they will hang their talons out, their claws, and it's kind of to show the other males and that they kind of like the talons, the weaponry that they've got if they come any closer. So it's rather than actually getting into a fight, that they'll actually show their talons off to actually show the other males what, if they come any closer, what they could actually be dealing with.
Yeah, because they never touch each other, but boy,
No.
are they noisy. I mean,
Yeah.
they're yelling at each other. I'm like, usually I've only seen it with like 3, and I always thought maybe it was mom dead and a kid that wouldn't leave the nest. But I was just like, this is like 10 this time.
Yeah, so you could find that it's probably a group of juveniles that have got together, because they will go round more so as juvenile birds that are kind of about 3-4 years old.
I thank you, because they're really fun to watch, but it's like, dang, they're noisy.
Yeah, they're not quiet birds.
They talk. Okay, I have a question from Terry. He wants to know, when the birds cross the Sahara, how do they survive without fish or water?
So what they will do is that they will feed up before they cross the Sahara. So it's different with, so like with the juvenile birds, when they leave kind of the UK, that the male will really feed those juvenile birds up so they're really fat. So what they'll do is that so when a bird converts that food, it stores it as fat. And if you ever see a bird up close, that they you know, on your neck here, you've got the clavicle bit, the little impression, the little deep bit here where it meets your rib cage, that basically the birds will store fat here in the kind of the neck area and then store it. Once that bit is full, it then stores it between their legs and then over the breast. And the idea is that it stores up so much fat that it can survive those journeys. But with a juvenile bird, the male gets to feed them up so that they're really fat and a good flying weight, because they're not going to be eaten until they get to almost southern Spain. So a couple of days later will be the next time they'll probably go and try and go fishing. And they won't catch the fish all the time. They will sometimes miss it. And then they kind of have a couple of locations. We found with the tracking devices, they have a couple of locations around the reservoir and around other sites where they will go fishing in different weather conditions. But what they'll do generally is that they'll either north or south of the Sahara, that they will make sure that there's a good feeding point. And that then just really becomes kind of out of practice or kind of come with practice, and it sinks into their memory that this is a good, really, really good feeding spot. And you can actually see that with those birds as they migrate, that they'll stop in those same locations en route.
Thank you. Elizabeth Donovan said Osprey Week is an amazing idea, and what a great way to connect communities and promote conservation. I do think that's a great idea. Kathy said, great talk. Stephen Hall asked, have they calculated the maximum capacity for osprey at the reservoir, and how close are they?
We've worked out that the reservoir will it can hold probably about a population of about 10 to 12 pairs. So with the ospreys over here, that they will nest within about 30 miles of their original nest site. So the males will, when they come back, they will want to go back to where their original nest site is. But we're working with kind of other landowners to look at spreading those population bits out to kind of not ease the pressure, but make sure that the population starts to spread out. So yeah, what was the other bit that I was going to say? So yeah, so we are looking at other places as well, like on our other reservoirs, to create nesting places. And because of this project, I must kind of say that it's kind of leads on to another project that I'm not involved in because it's out of my regional area, but placed on the southern coast of the UK, that we've used the research that we've done here at Rutland Water, and we've now got ospreys breeding down in the south now. And I think it was 2 years ago that they had their first osprey chick fledged there in over 200 years. And as a result of our project, we've got one of our females, so it's not ours as such, but it was ringed and raised at Rutland Water. But she now lives down on the south coast, and she's paired up with a translocated male from that project. And she's now in her 3rd year down there, and I think she's got 2 chicks there this year. So that would mean that she's had 5 chicks in the 3 years that she's been with this male. So it's quite amazing, really, to think that we've actually had a part to play in kind of re-establishing another colony of ospreys elsewhere.
Very cool. EJT said you should write a book.
Funnily enough, there is actually a book that has been written that people still can buy. I think you still can find it, or maybe on Amazon or Bloomsbury, that talks about the project. So I didn't write any of it, but there is a book out there, the Osprey book, which kind of talks about the whole project and the story about it all, and also we've also got some of the key volunteers that we've had, because a lot of this work that, yes, we can pay for things, but the amount of volunteers that we've got. So if you think that we have about 150 people that give up their time from March to September, and that's every single day, to either watch round the clock. We don't watch the nest so much nowadays in terms of making sure that the eggs are safe, but yeah, so we still record what the birds do, and we still talk to the general public and things like that. So it's got all of that going in that book. But yeah, if people do want to buy it, it is out there, but it is a good book.
Yes, and thank you for a great presentation. Thank you. They're noisy neighbors. An outstanding presentation. So very good. All right. And I
really appreciate. We know it's very, very late for you, so we don't want to.
Yeah, we don't want to do too much because I know
we really